5 cars I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Yeah, in fact, there's so many great, amazing cars nowadays. High performance, fast, luxurious, sporty, sexy looking, but yet there's still a few cars on this planet that are clearly not worth their time. Let's get into it now. Life's too short to drive boring cars. So the first car I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole is this. Now, obviously, we all see the positives and negatives, and I've done videos of both. Obviously, there are some reasons why people buy these. Clearly, it's that kind of vehicle I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. I wouldn't touch it with a 20 or 30-foot pole. I wouldn't touch it with your anyway. So what we're looking at here is a Tesla Model 3, and here we're looking at a Y. Now, there's a lot of reasons, and it's not just the faults and the things, and everybody talks about all of the paint. People talk about poor paint problems and fitment issues with panel gaps, and the fact that some wheels have come to the customers with bolts loose or suspension parts needed torquing and it wasn't ready, or the fact that you get humidity in the headlights, or the fact that other fitment issues and quality control issues just sort of plague these vehicles. Yeah, there's lots of issues that have plagued these. And even more importantly, the problem seems to rise related to some of the updates and the recalls and the software changes. Now, I want to mention, first of all, we're looking at a 3 here, great, but next to us is a Model Y. Did you know that there was a whole schwack of vehicles that were just recognized as the risk and the potential for that steering wheel to fall off? Could you imagine driving along and rip, the steering wheel comes off? Wow, that is a catastrophic failure waiting to happen. Yeah, they said they take it in, they fix it, and life's good, but what if you were one of the first unfortunate few that realized that and found it out the hard way? There's also 1.1 million vehicles that they said were getting over-the-air waves, changes to braking and software changes with braking and some of the control systems for safety. How would you like that realizing that your vehicle you were driving wasn't safe and wasn't adequately protected, and it took a pile of software updates to fix it? Not me. Also, we can't talk about some of the other software changes that have impacted and been done along the way. The fact of the matter is, you can change the way this car drives, and the dynamics and characteristics means that anything can grab a hold, anyone. Government, Tesla, who knows what's up next? We all talk about Big Brother having too much control. How would you like Big Brother to reach over and grab a hold of your stick shift? Not me. But anyway, so that's a big reason. It's too digitized, it's too electronic, and I'm not a fuddy-duddy. I've driven these and I know what they're about and they're fun to drive. However, are you ready and willing to relinquish control? Not me. So that's why these cars I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Well, hey, look, we have a beautiful Honda Civic. No, that's okay. Oh, we have a Ford Puma, not a good car, but even more importantly, right here is a Ford Focus. Let's take a look. I'll explain why you don't want this car. Yeah, you got the alloy wheels and little light there, of course, key old school. No sunroof on here. And as you circle around, pretty basic looking design theme. This one here is an EcoBoost. And of course, as you cycle down, pretty basic looking interior. As you see right there, not much going on there, but the rent, you could pretty much hose it out with a garden hose and you're good to go. And I can appreciate why people buy them. They're a price point car. People who are buying these aren't looking to spend big dollars on the next automotive journey. But the reality is you don't have to buy this when you can get something like this for similar money. Try a Honda Civic, for example, isn't a whole lot different in terms of cost. Even if you go more of a base model versus an upper spec Ford Focus, you're probably better off. So here's some examples of why this is junk, other than the fact that it feels like it's built by Mattel or Fisher-Price, or like they sort of got together and have this kind of love child, I don't know. But what we have here, think back, 2012-13, the Focus, I get that, Focus. The Ford Focus with the 1 liter, and it actually had an issue with the Dinkus hose, or Dagus hose. And what that was, it would leak coolant, and it would leak like a sieve. And it was well known, and a lot of people would just sort of not look at it, maybe for weeks, wouldn't look at the coolant reservoir to notice that the coolant was down, and then boom, their engine's gone because you overheat it once and your engine's toast. You either got to take it apart, disassemble, remachine, or just throw it away altogether. And the worst part is, a new engine is probably worth as much or more than a 2 or 3 year old Ford Focus completely. So you can literally almost write that car off. But there was lots of problems that led to just a poor build quality, and it's just never appealed to me, and that's a car I would never buy or I'd never even get near with the 10-foot pole. On the dashboard with certain generations, you have a faulty touch screen that would just be unresponsive, wouldn't work. Power steering problems. I mean, if you got yourself in a world of hurt with the power steering, yeah, then you couldn't turn yourself out of a harm's way, and nobody needs that when you're trying to cross a busy intersection like over there. Or the manual versions that had a 3-pedal system, of course, with a manual shifter, clutch issues galore. That would seem to be a common problem with some of these cars. And of course, wiper motor. So, you know, you look right here and there's a little cam here and it's connected and it just runs both those. There's an electric motor usually under there and it keeps things moving. Well, that's a common issue and that's the last thing you want. When the rain's coming down like a deluge in Salt Lake City and you can't see in front of you 5 feet, you definitely want that wiper blade to be running. But a lot of times that was an issue too. Then right there, that's your fuel system. Obviously, that's where you fill your fuel. You actually had fuel pipe leaks in some cases, and it meant gas on the ground. Potential fire hazard means a serious issue. Water leaks as well. You could get water in there. You could get water dripping in some of these seals right here, and you get water inside the car. Just water seals and water leaks in general, not a good scene. You had a stiff brake pedal, usually meant your power brakes or your braking system wasn't up to snuff, so pressing the brakes on the driver there meant sometimes a resistance, extra resistance, and your brakes wouldn't do the adequate job of slowing you down. Overheating control modules. And then the key wouldn't get, you couldn't take the key out, it gets stuck in the ignition right there and you couldn't get it out. Alternators were another common problem with these. They would eat them like for lunch. And alternators, if you don't have an operating alternator, it can either overcharge, undercharge. If you're overcharging, you can burnt out light bulbs. You know, if your regulator's not doing its job or the alternator's not doing its job, it can either undercharge. Well, like you said, you'll burn out electrics or electronics, or if it's undercharging, it may not do anything at all. It may not charge, you may not have lights, and it may not recharge the battery accordingly. So that could be a big problem. We also can't forget about another issue with these vehicles, and it's this sticky door latch right there. You couldn't actually get it jammed, it would jam up, and common issue there. If you can't get into your car, that's a bit of a problem. Brake hoses, another issue where they leak and you actually have spongy brakes. That could be one of the contributing factors as well to a stiff brake pedal. But usually if you're leaking, you go soft and spongy and it goes right to the floor. So that's another issue, as well as the oil filler cap. You couldn't actually get it off or it'd snap, and it's generally often very difficult to get the oil filler cap, and Lord knows, it's a Ford, you're probably constantly filling it up with oil, so you definitely need access to that. And you need to be able to get into the car to release the trunk and the hood to be able to change the oil. If you can't do all of those or any one of those, you're hooped. Now, a lot of people I know are gonna say in the comments, are gonna say, well, just do your maintenance. Yeah, but even if you're doing your spark plugs and your wires and your coils and all that stuff, fuel filters, and you're doing your standard maintenance, there's still lots of storylines where these cars have had these cutout issues and failures and misfires and shaky idles and a lot of issues. So it clearly feels like it's lacking the polish. It's not polished very well. It's clearly low on quality control. But at the end of the day, there's much better options. You want a lower price car similar to that, but with better reliability. I mean, here's an option. Right here, go with the Honda, for example. Even Subarus and certain engines can be better, but be careful because they're not perfect either. And even Volkswagens are better than the Ford Focus. And another car I literally wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole is this. Now, I just came back from Europe, and there's lots of these everywhere, just because space is a premium there. So a lot of people try to find the smallest car possible, but they come with the cost. Yeah, they're not cheap to start with, because really it was a little exercise where Mercedes and Swatch, the watch company, got together, decided to put something kind of chic and cool out there, and this is what they came up with. They used to have a diesel engine, now they have a gas jobby and electrified vehicles, but there's lots of problems, and not just the fact that every time I see one of these, my daughter, not me, my daughter says, oh, look at that, it's a clown car. Oh, look, it's a clown car, it's a clown car. I personally think they're kind of cool, but I mean, you have to get past that. And the fact of the matter is, driving down the road in one of those, when you come from a place like Canada, North America, and people are driving around in G-Wagons and pickup trucks and SUVs everywhere, you roll around in traffic in this little ride, everybody's looking at you like, wow, you cannot look cool riding this thing. And it's not about just cool, I get it. It's about other things, efficiency, cost savings, and all those other factors, but that's the problem. These things are known even for poor fuel economy in some cases where they're not running well and they're only getting 36, 37 miles to the gallon on the highway, which defeats the purpose. It's supposed to be small and economical, and it's not getting outrageous fuel economy. But there's other things. I mean, look, sure, you got the panels, you can change. Those are kind of cool, and the wheels would be kind of cheap to change as well. And yeah, it actually feels like a full-size door until you get around to the backside. And then you have all of this jazz here. But the plus side is if you break something or something takes a hit, you can replace a panel. So there's a benefit to it and relatively low cost of running, but there are some problems known to these. A lot of these vehicles have known to have engine issues. That's right, engines go. That's one issue. They've also talked about transmission problems with these vehicles where it gets sluggish and you get that shifty job and it actually doesn't shift all that well, or it's sluggish and it's sloppy and it doesn't respond very well. So between engines failing and bad transmissions, they also say brakes wear out prematurely quick, and the suspension's particularly floppy that when you're hitting dips and bumps, you're kind of bottoming out and hitting and and it's a very unrefined product, and especially something that has sort of Mercedes tag to it, it isn't all that cool. So from a looks perspective, cosmetics, reliability, there's no reason to even buy this. I mean, unless you need that small space where you can literally fit in a shoebox between another set of cars, because that's about the only positive in that vehicle. And another car I literally wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, and I really beg each and every one of you to avoid staying and just stay away from certain generations of BMWs like we have here. Now clearly anything before 2011 there was a certain amount of durability in there, and then after 2017 they sort of got some of that back. Of course, with engines like the B58 and the B48, they're amazing. The 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder engines after 2017 are actually quite reliable. But the problem is cars like this, what we're looking at is a 3 Series here. This is using the N20 engine. It's a turbo 4, and this was built from 2011 to 2017. Brutal! And so I extend that out to any other BMW with the 6-cylinder engine in that range. So in 2007, BMW came out with, they tried this twin turbo 6-cylinder engine called the N54, and it was a nightmare. Wastegate rattle, fuel pumps, fuel injectors. You had problems with water pumps and thermostats. It was brutal. And if it wasn't something broken, something else would break. Then you lift up the hood, fix that. 2 weeks later, something else is broken. It was a constant nightmare and a constant barrage of in the shop and high dollar expenses. The N20 isn't much better. So this car here, clearly, you've got the big rack on here. Somebody pulled this into the dealership because it wasn't able to drive in here by itself because of the engine that's under the hood of this thing. And what we're looking at here is a 3 Series BMW. This is likely going to be a 2013 model year, and this carries the wonderful N20 engine under the hood. Well, other than the N20, I mean, look, it does cause carbon buildup like that. You do have problems all under the hood. Now, sure, cosmetically, yeah, they had strong handles, they had good sunroofs that always worked, and some of the body panels would hold up quite well. The wheels were nice as well. Basic infrastructure, and the shell was actually quite robust. But the problem is any 3 Series, 4 Series, 5 Series, X vehicles, anything that you would find typically in that generation from 2011 to 2017, you're going to have big problems if you carry that N20 engine because it had lots of problems. Let's start with issues like oil leaks. For example, the valve cover would leak, the oil pan would leak. You'd have as well the oil filter housing, which was plunked right down on there. That happened both the N20 and the N54, as well as the N55 after, which is also 6-cylinder. They all had this oil filter housing that would just start leaking oil, antifreeze, and it would sometimes mix, and then you just had a problem and expensive labor because you had to pull apart the intake manifold to get at some of the retaining bolts. It was a big expensive repair. Lots of issues. We can't forget about some of the problems related to timing chain rattle. Now this N20 was notorious for that. So was the N47, the diesel engine in this era, but we won't get into that. The point is, this car had so many issues. Timing chain rattle, where you'd start to hear it kind of dragging like chains in a garbage can. And if you started to hear those types of noises, that usually meant you're almost close to the end, because it usually meant it had poor timing chain tensioners or timing chain tensioner ramps. The ramps are plastic, and the earlier generations, they'd start to crumble and they'd break. And if it got away from the chain got loose and it could literally skip a cog. And it did. It wasn't just a could have, it did. There was many cases where engines blew up because the timing went out of sync, and then you had a piston and valve smackdown. That is a car, any BMW with the 4 or 6-cylinder engines, and of course the N63, can't forget that little beauty, back in those generations from 2011 to 2017, steer away. If you need to have a BMW, buy something newer from at least 2018 and above. And there's a next vehicle I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. And what exactly is it? Well, it's a Kia. And yeah, it has some cute design themes. That's why people are buying them. But sadly, there's a lot of problems, just like its little brother over here. These Kias have had their share of problems. Yeah, the latest has some great headlights and beautiful alloys and basic mirror. Of course, some basic detail on top. You don't have sunroof or anything. And the interior looks pretty basic and bland, but that's not why you hate on this thing. Circle around, it's a Soul. Of course, you have those vertical lights. And yeah, there you go, EX, as well as the Sportage. Falls under the same criteria with the Kia. As you cycle around, a lot of people like them because they're small, compact, and it seems to not offend anybody until they sustain one of those rod knock issues because the oil passages start to get plugged off because of the machining issue. And they start to knock, and then boom, and the engine goes wham, and that's all she wrote. There's other issues too, transmission. There's been some electric issues, but the big one, of course, are recalls and bad engine issues. Lots of engines to be replaced with Kia, unfortunately. Now they're into the EV market, and there's already some big problematic areas where it goes pop, pop in the dashboard and then lights out. So clearly, Kia has had their share of issues, and that's why I would stay clear of a Kia Soul and Sportage. And with all of that said, right there, check it out. You're gonna love that video. That's my list of some of the worst vehicles that won't make it 100,000 miles. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.